My name is Alex Carter, and I never believed in ghost stories or the supernatural. That was, until the night we got stuck on that damn highway. I've spent the last few months trying to convince myself that it was just a bad dream, a series of bad decisions, or some kind of trick my brain played on me. But deep down, I know what we saw. What we felt. And I know I'll never forget it. It all started with a weekend trip I organized. It wasn't meant to be anything special, just a chance to get out of the city with a few friends. The idea was simple enough: drive down the highway, take a detour through the forested outskirts, and make our way to a quiet cabin in the woods. It was supposed to be a weekend of laughs, good music, and a few beers by a fire. But we ended up somewhere no one should ever go. There were 5 of us, me, my best friend Will, his girlfriend Jade, and 2 other buddies, Travis and Jenna. We'd known each other since college, and while we'd all gone our separate ways in life, the group was still close enough to get together for a few weekend trips. This one seemed like the perfect opportunity. We left the city just after dark, around 9 p.m., in Will's old van. He'd insisted it would be fine for the drive, even though it was a clunky piece of junk that had seen better days. But we didn't care. It was a road trip, after all. The night sky was clear, the stars hanging above us like bright pinpricks in the void. The highway stretched ahead in a straight line, the hum of the tires against the asphalt providing a steady rhythm. The only light came from the van's headlights, and the occasional flicker of streetlights we passed on the way. We were about 2 hours out from the city when Will suddenly swerved off the main highway and onto a smaller, winding road. It was barely visible at first, just a thin line cutting through the trees, illuminated only by the faintest glow of the headlights. "Where are we going, Will?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. I could tell something was off by the look in his eyes. Will glanced at me, a grin on his face. "Trust me. It's a shortcut." "You sure?" I was skeptical. Will wasn't exactly known for being the most dependable driver. "Yeah, it's a back road that cuts through the mountains. We'll get there faster this way," he said, his voice filled with that familiar bravado. I exchanged a glance with Jade, who seemed just as hesitant as I was. But everyone else seemed fine with it. Travis and Jenna were laughing in the back, probably already a little tipsy from the beers we'd brought along. We continued down the road, the trees on either side growing denser and the air feeling thicker with every passing mile. The road was narrow and bumpy, and I could feel the van shaking with every pothole. It was pitch dark now, the only sound the constant rumble of the tires. As we drove further, the mood began to shift. I couldn't quite place it at first, but something felt wrong. The trees on either side of us seemed to grow taller, more oppressive. It was as if they were closing in, their twisted branches reaching out like long fingers trying to grasp at the van. The headlights barely cut through the darkness, and I found myself squinting to see anything ahead. "Hey, are we going the right way?" I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. Will didn't respond at first. He was too focused on the road. But after a few moments, he let out a low curse. "Shit," he muttered, his hands tightening on the wheel. "I think we missed a turn." I leaned forward, looking at the road signs. Nothing was familiar. No signs, no markings, just endless trees. "Will, you sure this is a shortcut?" Jade asked, her voice tight with concern. "I swear it's supposed to be, but..." He trailed off, glancing at the rearview mirror. "It's weird. I thought we passed that turn already." I looked around, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The road was getting narrower, and there was an eerie quiet surrounding us. The kind of quiet that made you feel like something was watching. "Let's turn around," I suggested. "This doesn't feel right." "Agreed," Travis said from the back, his voice suddenly serious. "We can't be too far off track. Let's just go back and try again." But before we could even consider turning around, something strange happened. A figure appeared in the headlights. At first, it was just a shadow, a dark outline against the dense trees, too blurry to make out. But as we got closer, the figure started to take shape. It was tall, humanoid, but with an odd, unsettling posture. It seemed to be moving toward us, or at least in the direction of the van. My heart raced. Will slammed on the brakes, causing the van to screech to a halt. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, wide-eyed. "What the hell is that?" We all stared ahead, our breaths catching in our throats. The figure was now clearer, but it didn't make any sense. It was wearing tattered clothes, its limbs too long and unnaturally bent. Its head tilted at an impossible angle, as if it was watching us through the windshield. For a moment, I thought it was just a trick of the light. Maybe someone in a costume or some weird illusion. But then, the figure stepped forward, and we could see it more clearly. It had no face. Just smooth, pale skin where its features should have been, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just an empty, blank surface where a face should be. "Will," Jade said, her voice shaking. "Go. Go now." But Will wasn't moving. He was frozen, staring at the figure. I could feel the tension in the air, thick like a storm was about to break. Before anyone could say another word, the figure stepped forward again, its long arms reaching out toward us. That's when I heard the first sound, low, guttural, like a growl or a hiss, something so inhuman that it made my skin crawl. "Drive, Will. Now!" I yelled, panic creeping into my voice. With a shaky breath, Will finally snapped out of it and slammed his foot on the gas. The van lurched forward, speeding past the figure, and we didn't stop until we were a few miles down the road. But the tension didn't leave. It lingered in the van, thick and suffocating. Who the hell was that?" Jenna whispered from the back seat, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Will said, still staring ahead, his knuckles white on the wheel. "But we're getting out of here." We drove for what felt like hours, but every turn seemed to lead us deeper into the woods. The road hadn't improved, it was still winding, narrow, and now it was completely devoid of any signs of civilization. No streetlights, no other cars, nothing. Just trees. And that oppressive silence that felt like it was closing in on us. I don't know how long we drove, but eventually, the van began to sputter, its engine coughing and stalling. "We're out of gas," Will muttered. I stared out the window. There was nothing but trees, stretching endlessly in every direction. And then, I saw it. A sign, hanging crookedly from a rusted pole. It read, "Welcome to the Highway of Forgotten Roads." We stared at the sign for what felt like an eternity. The words, "The Highway of Forgotten Roads," seemed to pulse in the dim glow of our headlights, the rust on the metal sign creeping around the edges like something old, decayed, and ancient. The air around us felt heavier, as though the earth itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Is that even real?" Travis muttered, voice shaky. "This doesn't feel like the same road anymore." But it was. It had to be. I had to believe that we were still on the same road. Still somewhere real. But everything about this place was slipping into the uncanny, blurring the line between the natural and the supernatural. "Something's wrong," Jade said, her eyes wide with fear. "We've been driving for hours, and it's like we're stuck in some kind of loop. Nothing feels real anymore." I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, the van stalled again, jerking to a stop. The engine sputtered weakly and then died, leaving us in a silence so profound that it felt suffocating. Will hit the steering wheel in frustration. "This isn't happening. Not now." He looked around desperately. There's gotta be a gas station nearby. But there wasn't. Not a single light in sight, just the thick wall of trees pressing in on all sides, as if the forest itself was a living entity, watching us. It felt like we were being closed in on, trapped in some kind of nightmare. A long, drawn-out sound filled the air. A distant whisper, too soft to understand but heavy with an unnatural presence. My skin prickled as my gaze swept the woods around us, my heart hammering in my chest. It was then that I realized the worst part: the whisper wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the van, just barely audible, like a low murmur from somewhere within the vehicle, as if the van itself was breathing. "Did you hear that?" I said, my voice barely more than a breath. Jade nodded, her face pale. "What is that? Where's it coming from?" I turned to Will, who was still gripping the wheel, staring out into the void. "We need to get out of here, Will. Now." He didn't answer. He didn't even seem to hear me. His eyes were wide, his expression frozen, and I could see beads of sweat forming on his forehead, despite the chill in the air. Then, all at once, a noise louder than any of us could have anticipated shattered the stillness. A loud, deafening thud, followed by a series of rapid, erratic bangs. The van shook violently as if something was slamming against it from all sides. I screamed, instinctively pulling myself back from the windows. I couldn't see anything. Nothing. Just the blackness of the forest closing in, the trees bending and swaying unnaturally, as if the wind had become something alive. "Will, drive!" I shouted, my voice a panicked command. But he didn't move. His body was frozen. He wasn't even blinking. The van began to rock as if something massive was pushing against it. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. Panicking, I fumbled with the handle, only to hear another bang, this time much louder. The entire van jerked sideways, slamming us against the doors. "Will!" Jade screamed. "Do something." But then, something shifted. The pressure against the van stopped, as quickly as it had begun. And just like that, the silence returned, thick and stifling. But it wasn't the same silence. It wasn't the silence of the night we had driven through earlier. This silence had weight to it, a presence that seemed to watch us, weigh us down with dread. My heart was pounding in my throat. I could hardly breathe. And then I saw it. From the corner of my eye, I caught a flicker, just a shadow moving in the trees. For a split second, it looked like a person, no, like a figure, tall and bent, its limbs stretched at odd angles, its face, a blank, empty slate. It was staring at us. "Will, drive now," I pleaded, my voice a raw whisper. Suddenly, the van door next to me burst open with such force that I was nearly thrown out of my seat. The wind howled in from outside, cold and biting. I screamed, trying to pull myself back, but something was already pulling at me. Someone, something, was outside. But when I looked, no one was there. "Will," I turned back to him, my voice desperate. "Will, we need to leave. We need to go." But the seat next to me was empty. The van had been locked. Will hadn't gotten out. Yet he was gone. "Will?" I called out in horror, my voice cracking. The fear began to swell inside me, a cold knot of dread forming in my stomach. No answer. "Will?" I screamed again, frantic now. Jade and Travis were both silent, their eyes wide with terror. They looked just as confused and panicked as I was. None of us could comprehend what was happening, but the one thing that was undeniable was the emptiness beside me. I heard a soft shuffle, a faint whisper of movement, like something, or someone, had crawled across the floor. I turned my head slowly, and there, sitting in the driver's seat where Will had been moments before, was a figure. It wasn't Will. It was that thing. The one with the blank, featureless face. I froze, my blood turning to ice. My body couldn't move, couldn't scream. All I could do was watch as the figure's head tilted toward me, the empty face turning to stare directly into my eyes. And then, Without a sound, it opened the door, slid out into the night, and disappeared into the woods. The door slammed shut behind it. For a long moment, no one spoke. We just sat there, staring into the darkness, the weight of the moment pressing down on us, suffocating us. Then, as if in a dream, the engine turned over. The van's engine roared to life on its own. "Go, go, go!" Travis screamed, and before we could comprehend what was happening, the van lurched forward, speeding down the highway at breakneck speed. But it wasn't the highway we had driven on. The road was twisting, looping back in on itself, the trees growing more and more oppressive, closing in like a living, breathing entity. And then, before I knew it, the world went black. The last thing I remember before everything went dark was the sound of something scraping across the van's roof, something heavy and relentless. The next day, I woke up in a hospital bed, surrounded by confusion. A nurse told me I had been found on the side of the road, unconscious, the van nowhere to be seen. My friends were gone. Vanished. No one knew where they were. And when I tried to explain what happened, when I tried to tell them about the figure, the face, they said I was delusional. But I know what I saw. I know what happened. And I know I'll never forget that highway. The highway of forgotten roads. And the one thing that haunts me is this. Am I the one who's forgotten? Or are they still out there, waiting?
As the final echoes of the tale fade into the darkness, remember this: in the shadows where fear takes root, the true horror lies not in the creatures that lurk, but in the darkness within ourselves. We tell these stories not just to scare or entertain, but to confront the fears that we try so hard to ignore. So as you step back into the light of the real world, carry with you the lessons of the night. The monsters we create are reflections of our deepest anxieties, and the strength to overcome them is within each of us. Sleep well, and remember, in the realm of fear, we are the true masters of our fate. Good night, and may your dreams be free of shadows. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and click the notification bell for you to see my future update on this channel. Stay safe and always remember to lock your doors.